Good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I have a dear friend, and I have titled him today Sir Robert.
That's pretty nice. I've never had that title in the past.
Well, if anyone deserves it, it's my guest. And your full name is?
Robert Allen Peterson, born on the 4th of December, 1928. I'm actually 92 and a half years old.
Wow. This is why I truly felt the title was deserving. If a man 92 and a half can drive his own car, mow his own lawn, take his grandkids around,
Yes.
keep the family together, he keeps all the relationships warm and loving, that's the greatest achievement.
The greatest help and assistance and the greatest response that I've had in life has been raising the family. It has been so wonderful. We had the 4 children. The oldest one, Carl, is an attorney, and the second son went to West Point, graduated there, spent 25 years in the service, is retired, and is now a psychiatrist. And then the third one was a girl, 6'2", and some time ago, since I played ball for basketball, at 6'3" and a little bit higher, and I shrunk an inch. But she's standing next to me when she came away from New York, where she was stationed, and she sees that she's a quarter of an inch taller. So now my new name is Shorty in the family.
Oh.
So it's been quite a shock.
And what does the third daughter do?
The
Or
third
child?
The third child is an operatic singer, and she's in New York. She's the only one of our kids that are away, and we see her maybe 2 and 3 times a year. But she comes back and forth, from time to time. But she loves doing what she's doing, so we're very happy for her to do what she's doing. And as I say, right now we have a new connection because we're playing cribbage over the internet.
Oh.
And she signs in and is really on that TV with me about 3 times a week.
Wow.
So it really has lifted up our relationship, and I really enjoy her. But she's on the stage and she does operatic singing, and I was a teacher for 28 years, and big impact was that as far as knowing people, and about 8,500 students. But in the impact of all of this, Heather graduated from the district that we're in, and the big impact is that she wanted to take extra courses. So she went to New England Conservatory and became the operatic singer that she is, stationed right downtown New York City now.
Wow.
And loves doing what she's doing, and therefore we're happy about it. So
that's great. And then your next child is?
The last one was was a teacher, grade school teacher. But she taught for about 13 years, and then she decided that she had family. So she has a 6 and an 8-year-old child, and she's homeschooling now.
Oh, wonderful.
And we're so proud of her. We didn't want to say to her, we think you should do this, but she did it on her own, and then we told her how proud we were. The fact that she gave up a living, with the issue there of teaching, but now she's teaching her kids. And we show the kids off occasionally, because the 6-year-old was here with a group of our family recently, and I wanted to show him off. So I said, can you make the statement and quote the poem that you know? So what he did is to talk for about, I'd say 9, 10, or 11 minutes, talking about this poem that she had him memorize.
Wonderful.
And we were so impressed with it, and then it impressed these friends of mine.
What
and
was
that's what I wanted to do.
was the poem?
I can't remember it right now.
Okay.
But just the idea of doing that just made me swell up.
Isn't that beautiful? Literature and poetry is the foundation of all education.
Yes.
And you know, our people are right there, Robert. You might want to look at the camera when you, so they can see you, because Sir Robert, now I know one thing about your youngest daughter also, that she taught at a very exclusive school. She
Yes.
taught at Annie Wright Seminary in
Yes, she did.
Tacoma,
Yes.
which is a beautiful school. Oh my, it sits and overlooks the Puget Sound. And then the beautiful Wrights Park was named and given by also Annie Wright and Charles Wright. And then there's a Charles Wright Academy.
Yes.
And what a tremendous contribution these people made to Tacoma 100 years ago, because those structures are quite, they're, it looks like an English school. It's beautiful.
Yes,
And
yes.
the chapel looks like something you would see at Eton. It's absolutely stunning.
Yes.
And I think I know that the poem he would have memorized would be a classical poem, because I think she's doing classical conversations,
Yes. Well, Thomas, as I
which is a
say,
program.
he's 6 years old now.
Homeschool.
But I'm so impressed listening to him that he can do what he does in, say, 9, 10, or 11 minutes, whatever it was. But I was so impressed personally, I wanted to let others in the family see what he could do.
That is wonderful.
Oh, it was. And I was uplifting, to say the least, because Thomas is small, but he has the story down pat.
Yes. Well, poetry has always been traditionally the foundation from the time of Plato, Aristotle, even going back to the Hebrews. I believe Deuteronomy was their foundational. It's actually a poem, and the Hebrew young men would memorize it to learn their memory. They would recite it to learn their rhetoric, and they would copy it to learn their writing.
Yes.
What a wonderful concept. And I think your grandkids are in a program similar to that, which,
Yes. Oh, we
wow.
were just so happy with what she's done. And her husband is the same type. We've got all these Petersons, and they're pretty talkative. And the husband is like this, but he's the kind that gets in and does. So whatever happens, around there, he's completely involved. And we're so impressed with
Isn't
what he
that
can do and
wonderful?
how he can do it. Yes.
When each one can use their gift and talent. Well, Bob, tell us about your childhood briefly.
Yes, I grew up in a small little town called DuPont. And DuPont, I look back with the greatest memories. In fact, in my prayers, virtually every night, I have something to say about DuPont. But the small community was 100 homes, and actually there was, say, 400 people total. And in essence, I really had 20 brothers and sisters, because people that were next door neighbors and down the street. I had a friend, Harold Roberts, Dick Peterson, two that came to our home, Bernard Stratton, but I got to know them so well. And we competed in athletics, basketball, baseball, marbles, and different things in our yard, because my dad made our yard so that they would want to come to our home. And we had a strike 'em out area there, taking a tennis ball, get back 60 feet, throw it at the other, and then we hit it. And so far it was a single, double, triple, or home run if it went over the garage. And my dad observed this, and the little story I'd like to tell about it was on Bernard Stratton. Because Bernard was he's a little shorter than I was, but he was just tough and big. And the idea was that he would come into the yard, and my dad would catch us when we were kids, because it was from elementary, junior high, and high school especially. And he was wild. It's March hen, I guess I would say. But the big impact was that he would throw the ball, my dad would catch it, but be wild. So one day, he threw the ball and it went above my dad's head and right into the kitchen window. Broke the window.
Oh, wow.
But my dad was such a kind of a person I want to mention. As I grew up, the next day the window was fixed. Nothing was ever said about it. So what he did is changed where the pitching and the throwing was, until finally, some 3 weeks to 4 weeks later, same thing happened. We're playing catch out there, and all of a sudden, bird threw the ball, went above my dad's head. In this case, he had moved closer to the house, right into the same window. Broke it.
Oh my goodness.
So my father fixed it the next day, never a word. And I learned to love my father dearly. And the reason is because he never got upset about things. And to me, growing up in DuPont, small community, everyone knew everyone. And one of the things that we did was every Sunday we went to church, to a little Presbyterian church. And with 400 people in the community, a good 100 people would be going to church each Sunday. And what happened was that Harold Roberts, Dick Peterson, and the other friends of mine, we would sit in the front row. And the minister would allow us to be involved and engaged. So what we did is, citizens in that small little community, we could call out numbers of songs in our hymnal books. So 445 was In the Garden. And so some period of time would come up, and they'd want something done. So I'd call out 445, and it was In the Garden. So it was, I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, etc. And they say we just lived that. And back and forth, and then somebody could come up with 333. That was Wonderful Words of Life, or other things that they had, and it made us feel a part of the whole community. So it was a community affair to go to the church. So I had what I would say to you, and I was commented before, I had 20 brothers and sisters in essence.
Beautiful.
Because what happened was that my friends would come to our yard because my father made it comfortable for them to come. And there was no concern, on his part. He just tried to organize things and have them so that we would enjoy ourselves. So we played our marbles very competitively. We played that baseball game, the tennis ball, strikeabout we called it. And we played it very competitively, so far being single, double, home run, etc. And as a result, Harold was a year older than I was. And so he made the teams over at Clover Park. We were all going to the DuPont school in this small little community. And then after the 9th grade, we'd go to high school. Well, Harold made the teams. So I was a little taller and a little stronger, I guess, in certain areas of baseball because I could hit. I had good eyesight, because I could say this if I justified it, is that today I'm 92, I still drive. I don't have to wear glasses. And the reason why I don't is because I've got good eyesight.
Wow.
So I could see the ball. Well, one of the little things in my outline, as I have here, the Tribune in a small little community would write up things. In one series, there were 3 games, and I had 2 hits for 3 trips, 2 hits for 3 trips, 3 for 3. So what the Tribune wrote up was that Peterson had 7 hits and 9 trips, and made a big issue out of it. Today, that wouldn't happen because the Tribune, doesn't cover it like TV does.
Right.
And so somebody could do the same thing, and it's a matter of competition. I shouldn't be trying to say this like bragging, because we were a small community. We did play Stadium and Lincoln, and the year I was a senior, we beat them both times because we had some pretty good teams. But DuPont was a type of community that everyone knew what you were doing, how you were doing it. And in many cases, like each one of us learned to drive early. And maybe you've heard my stories about driving, did you?
I heard one.
Did you? Well, the one that I would say and mention to you now was that my grandfather lived in Nisqually. And so we'd go down to Nisqually during the summer. And not only myself, but others would be in the same way. But at any rate, my Uncle Myron was next door, and he was harvesting hay. And so a certain week in the summer, we were free from school, and he would be harvesting issues. So what happened was I was 7.5, and he invited me along. So I rode in a truck with him, and he'd get in the truck, drive up to the haystacks, get out, put the haystacks up in the back of the truck. It was a 1.5-ton Ford truck, not a pickup. but truck. And the end result was he did this from maybe 9 o'clock until about 11. So finally, he was a guy, a little shorty, came to my shoulder, but not at that time. But the big impact was that he was small, but he was really directive. So he said, "You can do this," just like that. And so I got in the truck, and the only way I could do is to sit against the seat and push against the front of the seat to disengage the clutch. And it was a 4-speed type of issue, you know, compound low in first, second, third gear. So what I did is get in there and I stalled it 3 times in a row. Just give it some gas. And so I gave it enough gas, but I had stalled it 3 times. So finally I was able to drive it because he got tired getting in, getting out, getting in, getting out. So I drove up between the stacks. I did that for about an hour and a half, and that ended the day. But every summer came, I was down at Nisqually when he had to harvest.
Oh, wow. How fun. How wonderful.
I drove when I was 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 10.5, and 11.5, 12.5. Now 12.5, the big impact was something, this is why my uncle was one of the 4 heroes that I have in life. Because what happened was he had a 1923 Overland, and he drove it from Nisqually up to DuPont and gave me that 1923 Overland. Well, now, there's a part of the story, and I won't overdo it here, but I thought my folks would be a little bit hesitant about me being 12 and a half years old. But at that time, more than one of us as kids were driving. But not at 7.5 like I was.
Wow.
But the big impact was that he gave me the car, and my folks didn't say a thing. I was shocked about it.
Wow.
But now I let it sit, and the battery went down. So 2 of my buddies came one day, and then behind our home in DuPont, there's a big hill. So we took it out there in front of the hill, and the 2 buddies and myself, and I stood alongside the side of the car with a door open to the driveway, to the driving steering wheel. And we pushed it down the hill, got going, and I jumped in the car, put it in gear, and it didn't start. So we're halfway down the hill. So we tried it again. Now we went down to the very bottom of that hill, and the road turned to the right. A house up here on the right side, and 2 of the houses really there. But at any rate, got down there, it got going well, turned the corner, and the front left wheel came off. Now, a 1923 Overland has wooden wheels, so they have a metal deal to hold it on. But it came off, and I was so incapable of working on a car at that time that one of the buddies that was pushing for me bought it for $25.
Oh, boy.
Because I didn't know what to do with it, you know. They were sitting in the road, you know, front wheel off. But he bought it, paid me, and he took it that way. But what a joy, and what the trust that my Uncle Myron had in me, you know, for going through that process, and my folks accepting it as it was. But I was so impressed.
So the real theme of your life is you had so many people who positively believed in you.
I have several stories like that, and
supported you.
I could bring tears to my eyes, because I'll tell one other little story. Because I went to high school, finally I played ball over there because my buddy Harold, I mentioned to you already, but he made the teams, and then I felt confident I could, and I did. But now I met Al Stout, who was the center of the team, and Ed Conmey, and they were 2 of my friends. So what happened was I went over and I played basketball and baseball, and I played all 3 years. I loved doing it. And it was just a wonderful experience, you know, to be involved. So during the year, I wanted to continue to play baseball morning, noon, and night like I was. But my buddy said, "We're going to run you for president, Peterson." That was for Boys Club president. Well, had I thought I'd win, I would have withdrawn my name because I was so involved in 2 sports, basketball and baseball. Well, the end result was that as far as I was concerned, then they just pushed me about it, and they had confidence in me. And I loved that part. But it allowed me to learn to be a little bit more limited on what I was doing in sports, to broaden my scope of learning. And but I was so happy with my buddies, because we're going to do this for you, kind of a rough, tough stuff. And we became such good friends. There's another story that I'd tell later maybe about it.
So this would be in the late 1930s and early 40s?
Yes, right.
So you were living an American community life that was genuine community.
Oh, it
People
was,
knew your name, you knew their name.
yes.
You had, your family was supporting you, your friends were supporting, and your relatives were supporting you.
Absolutely.
So what would you say to people raising children today? What do you think is one of the most important things to keep at the very front of your mind?
To me, it's having wonderful friends at every level. Harold Roberts, I say, our elementary school, junior high, high school, we played competitively. We were opposite politically, but it never bothered us. When I graduated from high school, Harold Roberts, Dick Peterson, and then I got another friend from WSU where I had done my undergraduate work, Sam Macaroni was his name, became a wonderful friend. And the same thing happened to me when I went to WSU. These two buddies, Ed Conmee and Al Stout, the center of the team, they came over to WSU, and then we got into a freshman dorm. Now, I had a friend in DuPont who wanted me to go through Rush. I didn't want to join, but I did go through it. And in part was that I had gone over to Rush, and then I got through, and they saved me a spot in the freshman dorm, 500 men. So they saved me a spot. The same thing happened as Boys Club in high school. We're running you for president, Peterson.
So he expanded his horizons, but as I'm hearing it, you had a community with the same friends in church, in school, and then in your extracurricular activities. And so you were really establishing relationships because you were an only boy and you had one sister.
Yes.
And your family was very close, but not having a brother, having these friends was so important, right?
Absolutely.
And so what I'm hearing, Bob, is to have good friends. And in the Proverbs it says, to have friends, we must become friendly. That's what it says in Proverbs. To have friends, we must become friendly. So I would say perhaps training your children and parents modeling, reaching out and having relationships in the community. So critical, isn't it?
I believe
Not being isolated.
I think it's just ideally important, to say the least. Like the high school and the college and those experiences at each level. Yeah, and I'd say one other thing. Coming from high school, they did this, and then they ran me for this present for the dorm. And I
wow.
haven't said that to you yet, have I? But the big impact is that I went through Rush, came back in. Had I thought again that I'd win, I would have withdrawn my name because I had already committed myself to play ball for the Cougars, and I was playing ball for them. Well, end result, same thing happened. I won, and there's 500 guys. Now, I'm really excited about it because, in a negative way, because I would have withdrawn my name for sure, sincerely. But the thing is, now I'm a president of 500-man dorm. Now I've got to have paper to put out, twice a month or once a month in order to let people know about the hours, study hours. Well, this is where I met one of the best friends that I've ever had. We never had words. We were one of four. He was one of four people that we took a tour around the United States together. Sam Macaroni.
Oh, wow.
Sam, I've got to tell you this, but he came from a Lincoln, Illinois home. His parents were lost somewhere.
Oh, he was an orphan.
An orphan. And so he came to WSU because his sister lived near there. And so what happened was he came to the same dorm. Now, I had to have somebody write a paper. Sam came to my shoulder, little tiny guy, but rough and tough in a way, and played basketball himself. But the big impact was he volunteered to do that paper. I still have a couple of those papers, and one of them shows Peterson Says, S-E-Z, in this paper.
Oh, uh-huh.
But this was to contact the people. But Sam and I became such friends because his sister was there, but they were quite far enough away that time was there with us. Like, for instance, I would be in the dorm, he was living off campus, and we would take some of the food that we had eaten or had on our own, in the hall, and we'd take it to Sam to eat, Now, at the end of the year, he had really no place to go. His sister, but it was relatively limited. But so, thing is, I invited him to come home, and I've already told you how my parents were. They were absolutely wonderful. He came home with me in the summer, and we got him a job, and he stayed with us this summer, and my folks treated him like a son.
How beautiful.
And well, that's how my folks were. And my sister, just maybe a year ago, called me one time over the phone. She says, "Bob, have you ever heard Mom and Dad argue?" "No." "Neither have I." So our comment was they must have argued. But how many people were raised in a family where their mother and father were so considerate that they didn't argue in front of you? And see, we learned to love our mother and father dearly early.
Beautiful.
And they accepted our friend. Like when I asked Sam to come home, I knew that that's what they would do, is accept that. And I just enjoyed the comments, they made. They did treat him like a son.
How grateful, because to me, when you can have peaceful relationships, it is a sign of great maturity. Your parents were very mature. And you have many people that are grown up now in their 40s, 50s. They're still not mature, because we have to actually, through Christianity, you learn to put others first.
Yes.
And to not be selfish, right?
Absolutely.
That's the ultimate, is to put others first. And it sounds like your parents lived that. They didn't have to speak it, they lived it.
They did.
Beautiful. What a rich man you are.
I've been I'll thank the good Lord many times, even today in my prayer at night, because they were so great. As I say, one thing I've liked about Rotary, I'm a Rotarian, is that they teach the fact that you reach out past yourself to grow. And to me,
very good.
It's a wonderful feeling to be with a group of people, like in Rotary as an example. I feel very strongly about it. I've been 17 years there. And as I say, I've really enjoyed it because it's a good spirit to give and you receive. And I could give you a dozen questions and comments about that.
Well, that's the thing. I think one of the reasons we wanted to do the talk, you and I, is because so many people are isolated now. And that is probably the worst thing that can happen to someone.
Yes.
Isolation. And so I think it takes intention for all of us to reach beyond our comfortable zone.
Yes.
And reach out to others. It could be a smile, it could be a phone call, it could be a letter, it can be a note. And you live that, Bob. You live that. And you had a high school coach that gave you a lot of character in choosing. You want to talk about him?
Yes, I do. Bill Tone was his name. And I played basketball and then baseball at Clover Park High. And one day, sophomore level, he had a meeting with the basketball team. He says, "All right, fellas, I'll level with you. If you smoke, you drink, and we catch you, you're out." Bernard Stratton, remember one of my good friends I've already spoken about, was caught smoking.
Oh.
He was ousted. It devastated him. I wanted to play. See, I inherited this. So I've gone through life, and one of the greatest stories I'd want to tell today, if I have time,
Yes.
and that is the impact that as I tell this story, uh, I've forgotten my thought right away, but it was with my
Grandson.
grandson Alex, and Alex was 8.5 years old, and I drove him back from his school to his home, and I have a letter I put out to all the grandkids at the age of 15, and those 15, this was number 8 that I was interested in, is Grandpa, I want to do that. I didn't know what he meant as we were driving home, and he was so sincere about it. So we got home, he still wanted to talk about it. And instead of getting out and going in his home, he's telling me about this. And then I find out it's number 8. And number 8 says, I've never smoked, I never drink, I don't drink or smoke. If you don't drink and smoke, you can buy and pay cash for 2 new cars in your lifetime. Now, this is what he wanted to do.
Beautiful.
Now, there's a second part of this story. Though I'm taking him to his house, and he's still talking to me about it, still sincere. I'm listening carefully. So I have a tendency to give each of the kids practically every time I see him a dollar bill. So when he got out, I gave him a 5. I was that impressed.
Yes.
So he's still talking about it. So now, 2 weeks later, he comes over to our house here, and from Stillicum. And so the impact is that he's talking about this. Oh, talk about this grandpa, this and that. And I'm listening to him again. So what I did is got an envelope, and I put his name on it, and I put a $100 bill in it.
Oh, great.
So then we took a truck over to the state deposit box and deposited it. The end of this part of the story is that now he turned 21, and I have a caution in there is that this is the time that he gets a $100 bill. So I got the letter out of the state deposit box, and he turned 21. So we took it through the process, and I told him, and there was one thing I wanted to let him know, that I didn't want this letter that I have of 10 items to be rigid. And if you're 21 and you want to take a test and see whether you like maybe some kind of a drink, do so. It's not that strict, is what I'm saying. And the impact is that I guarantee you, I put my word on the fact he'll never drink or smoke. But if he tasted, I just want him to be himself. Because number 1 on my list is be yourself. And I didn't want to get into that issue. But he got the $100 bill. And the last part of the story is that when this happened, when he was 8.5, somewhere along between 8 and 11, he convinced his brother and sister
Isn't
to
that
take the Ten
beautiful?
Commandments.
Isn't that
Well, it
beautiful?
cost me $200 more.
Great.
I was so happy to pay that $200
Isn't
more.
that beautiful? The influence that siblings have on each other.
And they love each other. And I say, I would put my life saying here, making sure it's being tested here, on the life of the line. And none of the 3, there's a boy and a girl, and they're not. One is 19 now, and he'll go 2 years from now. We'll have a meeting too. And then his sister is a junior in high school. But I'll say this to you: they will not drink or smoke. And to me, I like the idea that they have that option to get away from that, because you could actually buy more than 2 new cars today.
More than that. And the grief and the sorrow that they will avoid in their life.
The health
And the
issue.
health.
Yeah.
The health. And if anyone listening would like a copy of Sir Robert's letter that he sends, you're happy to share that, aren't you?
Absolutely.
And there was one other thing that I was really struck with, that your travel to Europe
Yes.
when he was a young teacher, and this is in the 1950s, when travel to Europe would have been the dream, because the countries are genuinely, they all have their own coins. Each one is still very unique. It's right after World War II. The dollar is so strong. The dollar would go so far. You could buy so much. And so for an American traveling in Europe, and you told me there was a special place in Switzerland
Yes.
that you loved. I've been there too, but tell our people about that.
Mount Pilatus, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I decided to take a tour before I got married because it was a 20,000-mile trip, and it probably cost me around, I think it was about $11,000. But I'm a saver. I've always been tight, a little tight. I'm proud of the fact of being tight because I have a budget and I keep it. But I went to Europe, and I got on about 5.5 hours of sleep each night, and I took several side trips. And one of the side trips went to White Cliffs of Dover. I wanted to go to.
Oh yeah.
And I did that particular tour, and we traveled different places. And then one of the places we went 20,000 miles, and I think it was 17 countries. But anyway, we ended in Switzerland, and at Switzerland we went up Mount Pilatus. And the story I have to tell on this is an interesting one for me, and I hope that you'll like it. But we got on a car, a cable car, that went up this hill on Mount Pilatus.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're first on it, I was in the back with a camera, and there was probably about 20-some people in the car. And the first thing I remember now, and I can see it now, we looked down, I saw a mother with 2 children, and they were working in the hayfield. And then we went up past that, and then we went up where it looks like you're going to be at the top of a mountain. There's a kind of a peak there. And lo and behold, it wasn't. We went out into space, and we could look down thousands of feet. As a matter of fact, one of the French jets broke that cable one time earlier, and created a real problem with it. But at any rate, we went up further, and then we hooked on to a little cage up on the top, and then we could walk up further. I actually walked up the distance, and I could actually put my hands over the top of that mountain.
Mount Pilatus.
Well, no, it wasn't Mount Pilatus. It was where the cable car was.
Oh, the cable car.
And it was right there. It was one of the high points, there. But Mount Pilatus, we could look out and see that area, and we could look into French. We could see the French mountains, and we could see different things
The
around.
Matterhorn, I think.
The Matterhorn is specifically. And as a result, then we went down the other side on a cable car out to Lake Lucerne.
Yes.
And then
I
we
was
got
there.
on a boat, came back on Lake Lucerne to the areas where we were stationed and stayed a night. But it was a wonderful trip, and it ranks #1 in all the trips that I've done.
Oh.
And it was so beautiful, and we had great weather that time
Yes.
too. But yes, that was a joy and a half. But there are other issues too, going up to Switzerland and past Switzerland into Germany, and we were up into Scandinavia, both, and we went into different areas up in there, which were very, very interesting for me to see. Because one of the things that we did, we went into London and up to Scotland, and went out into the areas, north of Scotland.
The Hebrides?
Into the Hebrides area.
Oh, I've been there.
Yes, beautiful area.
Oh, that's the most phenomenal area.
Yeah,
It's the northwest of the whole island of Britain.
And in Scotland there, we went into areas north of Scotland, and Mount Pilatus, but I can't remember the name right now. But just a beautiful sight, and just we had unlimited time because I was just on my own.
Oh, nice.
And I got by on 5.5 hours sleep average.
Right.
But what a wonderful trip it was. And as I say, my wife and I, since we've been married some years later, and we've taken a trip similar. We've done some of the places up there that we had.
Travel is what really opens your life to the whole world, doesn't it?
It broadens the scope of what you see, and you realize how fortunate we are to be in the United States of America.
Yes.
I'm very strong. I had a chance to teach for 28 years, and what a joy that was to see our country and to kind of feel the interest, of Washington, Adams, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, the depth of that in terms of what was given, the tremendous number of loss of life of people, to break away from England, Greatest Power of the Time. Those were joys for me to feel as a sense in teaching. And as I say, I still have in Rotary, I have 4 former students of mine that are in Rotary.
Oh, yes. So Sir Robert is a mentor. He had wonderful mentors, and you are a mentor.
Well,
you have your same students from high school?
Some high school, yes. And
Wow.
they still respond, and I had about 8,700 students.
And what was the class that you were telling me? Was it civics or?
U.S. History, Contemporary Affairs, Western Civilization.
Western Civilization.
Well, in Western Civ, when I was 20 years a teacher, the school district was so good to me. They wanted me to teach a class on humanities. And so I did have my master's degree at UW. So they spent, half of $8,000, and I spent $8,000 to take a year off to go to Oregon State. And I did some work towards a doctorate. I took philosophy, and Plato and different ones, that we studied. But that was to teach our best students in Western civilization.
How fabulous.
Which was my favorite class to teach.
I wish I could have taken it.
Oh, I'll tell you, I would have loved to have you. But you learn so much through the eyes of the students. And I really appreciate it.
Do you remember the books? You told me once the books you used.
I have it right in here now, and I can't remember.
Well, I know. I think you used Plato's Republic.
Oh, yeah, Plato's Republic. Yes, we did. I did use that.
And there were others, and I mean,
Aristotle.
it was a real, true, quintessent education you really wouldn't get anywhere today.
Well, it was just such a joy. It truly was.
Fabulous.
And the people at Oregon State were so warm. And Robin and I had our third youngster there. We took the year off, and she enjoyed it as much as I did, in terms of it. But, it was time consuming to give yourself direction on it. But the people there were so responsive. And I just enjoyed it so much.
You've had such a God has designed your life, because I think going back to college as an adult, after you've worked in a field for a while, you appreciate it so much more, and you're ready for it. And I believe that we're all in school, and we all need to keep studying, no matter how old we are or how young we are.
Yes.
And it's in the air. It's September, right? It's back to school.
Absolutely. And I still have the structure of that, because since, December of 2001, I've read 360 some books.
Wow.
All nonfiction. I tried to read some of the texts that other U.S. history teachers taught to give me an insight to their views. But one of the best things that ever happened that I want to share here is that like Harold Roberts and I, from the DuPont situation, were opposite politically, I mentioned before. And the big impact is that helped me, I think, I hope, a better teacher, knowing his view, and we never had words over it. And he's one of the 4 people that went on the USA trip.
Oh,
and,
isn't that great?
Oh, we drove, and then that's when I met Sam Macaroni too. I knew him and enjoyed him because of it.
Well, Sir Robert, it has been an absolute pleasure to interview you today.
Oh, I love to talk about what we did.
Yes. Do you have any last little golden nugget of wisdom to give our audience today?
I'll just say this, that having taught school was the key and the biggest point in my life. I know raising a family to me was it. That was a big deal. But separate to that is being involved with people when I was growing up. Having a right friend, and what I would share lastingly was that when I was in service, I had gone to WSU and I had taken some background history, and a big impact was that I met Bill Smith. And Bill Smith and I both were draftees during the Second World War, the Korean War, and 51, 52, and 53. Well, he and I served the same times within a year and a half. He got out of the military at that time, and he and I took a trip across, driving in his car south from Fort Bliss down through to Florida. We flew over to Cuba, went on to
wow.
Maine,
My goodness.
and took that trip. And this is an 8,000 mile trip. Flew all the way up the coast from Florida to Canada, and went back down into the U.S. I bought a car myself, and we drove to his home in Montana. But he and I became
wow.
friends similar to like Harold Roberts and Dick Peterson and Sam Macaroni and myself.
Oh, wow.
But I wanted to tell you that one.
That's phenomenal. I think that you've had a beautiful life,
I felt that way.
and God has been so good to you.
He really has, and I do say in my prayers, you know, how fortunate I feel. And to me, a lot of my life has been dumb luck, I felt.
Or destiny.
Well, as I say, the good Lord has taken care of me in each case.
Beautiful.
And here I am, 92 and a half.
Oh, that's just great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we can have a lot of food for thought, and I believe you've helped a lot of people today, and you've inspired me, and
Okay.
you know, life is learning from one another and being our best.
But I want to say this, how much my wife and I have appreciated what you do and how you do it, and what you've contributed and things that you've done. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. God be with you and bless all of you, and may we apply this wisdom to our lives from Sir Robert.
God bless.